Hello everyone, welcome to ChessVisor, your wise choice to improve your chess. In today's video, I am going to show you a very interesting game played between Praggnanandhaa Ramesh Babu and Magnus Carlsen. And this was played in FTX Crypto Cup, which is happening at Miami, and this was final round. So they have to play four rapid games, and this was the fourth rapid game. Earlier, the game 1 was draw and game 2 was draw, and the third game was won by Magnus Carlsen. And this game, he should win the game so that he can stay on the match, right? So without much delay, let's get started. So here Prag was handling the white pieces, so he opens the game with one d4. And here interestingly, Magnus plays some weird opening called Gankaru defense. So he plays the move e6, so c4, and then bishop to b4 check, and we have bishop to d2 blocking the check, and bishop takes d2 check, so queen takes d2. After this, Magnus plays pawn f5, gaining space on the king side, but it kind of weakens the king side, but still he plays f5 here. So Prag follows up with knight c3. We have knight f6 on board, so e3, and now pawn to d6, and after bishop to d3, Magnus hits in the center with the e5, and Prag simply ignores and develops his knight to e2, and we have pawn to c5. Now Magnus put pressure on the same pawn with the dual pawn like e5 and c5. So here he must react. So he wants to have the space advantage. So Prag pushes the pawn to d5 to gain more space, but that will weaken the d4 point as well as the d3 point, and that you will see in a moment here, because he is going to push the pawn to e4, and now the bishop is kicked, and now the d3 is another weak point, but okay, d4 is covered by the e3 pawn, but e4 is covering the d3 square. So that means Magnus would try to put the knight on d3 at some point of time. So here Magnus plays knight b d7, we have bishop a4, castles, and then bishop takes d7, and then knight takes d7. You must be wondering why Magnus is capturing with the knight, right? So why don't we develop a bishop here? So the idea is very simple, because if we capture with the knight, and this knight can come to the d3 square via the e5 square. So that is the point of capturing the piece back with the knight. So we have pawn to h4, and Praggnanandhaa here plays aggressively, because he must win the game. So he is trying to force Magnus. So knight e5. He simply ignores the pawn push on the king side, and he plays with his own plan. So we have pawn b3 because c4 was hanging. So we have knight d3 check, and king f1. Now the castling rights lost by Prag, and we have queen f6. Nice battery for Magnus here. So queen and rook battery, and knight to f4, trying to remove the beautifully placed knight here. So we have pawn to b5, knight takes d3, e takes d3, we have c takes b5. And after this move, Magnus plays the move pawn to a6, and we have rook d1. He wants to simply not only trade the, or capture the pawn with the queen, but he wants to have this battery thing. And here Magnus simply captures a takes b5, and we have knight takes b5. So there is a pressure on d6 now. So we have pawn to f4. It's very logical move. So we want to open the line. So that's why he pushes the pawn to the f4 square to open the center of the board to take advantage of the king's position. So in this position, he simply takes the pawn, and here Magnus should have played bishop f5 here. Try to hold on to that passer. Instead of that, he plays the move pawn bishop to g4. And after f3, still he plays the move bishop f5, but he lost 2 tempos in the process. So we have king f2 now, rook f e8. Rook e2 was a threat, so knight c3 covering that square. So h5 here, stopping the h pawn further. Rook d e1. So we have one pair of rook off the board. So rook takes e1, rook takes e1. We have queen takes h4 check, king to g1. After king to g1, so we have queen f6 here. So queen f6, we have knight b5, pawn to h4, a4. A4 is kind of inaccuracy or a mistake, because after a4 we can simply push the pawn to c4. That's what actually Magnus does here. So c4, b takes c4, and then we have rook takes a4, and that's why it was a inaccurate move. So we have rook c1 defending the base point by Prag, and king h7, king h2, bishop to g6. We have rook c3, We have rook a2 by Carlsen. Queen takes a2, there is a tactics here, so queen takes f4 check. After king h1, the pawn cannot be stopped promoting, right? So that's the point of giving up the rook for free. So d2, and now the the back rank should be defended twice. So he goes first with queen a1, and after queen e5, pinning that. Not only pinning the, it's not actually a pin because he is actually threatening to give the queen e1 check, right? So he plays the move rook c1, giving up the rook back. In case if you're wondering about rook a3 or some other move, I'm going to show you this line. Rook a3, queen e1 check, and after king moves, we can promote the queen. And this is the last position for white. So going back in this position, he plays rook c1, giving up the rook, which he gained earlier. So d takes c1, promoting to rook, that is coming with a check. So queen takes c1 is a forcing move. And in this position, the game is completely equal and there is no problem for both the players. We have this pawn structure for white. This is kind of good for white because we have 4 pawns against 3 pawns, and we have the knight versus the bishop imbalance, but still the game is equal. But in the game, here Magnus blunders the game by playing bishop d3. Why it's a blunder? Because the bishop is kind of undefended, and in fact you cannot even capture the pawn here. And here, immediately sensing this idea, Pragg attacks the bishop, and here Magnus could not capture the pawn because that will leave the bishop undefended, and that will invite the tactics. So queen c2 check will simply pick up the bishop for free. So that means white would win the game. So sensing that idea, Magnus retreats the bishop, and he again wastes some tempos here. Bishop f5. We have queen g5, trying to grab the h4 pawn here. So h3. We have knight takes d6 check, the tactical move, because if you take the knight, I'm going to take the bishop with a check and then the pawn. So I'm going to show you that variation also. Suppose queen takes d6, then we have queen takes f5 check, and after king g8 we can play queen takes h3, and this is a dead loss position for black. So that's why he plays the move h takes g2 check first, and we have king g1, and Magnus simply forces the king to take the pawn. So king takes g2. We have a few more checks here. Queen e2 check, king g3, queen e5 check, king f2, queen b2 check, king g1. After queen d4 check, we have king g2 again, queen b2 check, and then king h1. So here, after bishop to d3, again he attacks that pawn, but okay, that is being defended by the knight for the time. So queen e3 we have, because the bishop is undefended. And after bishop f1, we have queen to g1. So we are threatening to capture the bishop now. Our Pragg is threatening to capture the bishop now. But here Carlsen again blunders the game by playing queen c1, and this is a massive blunder because that allows the move knight to f5. And not only that, and we are going to simply push the passes, and that cannot be stopped. And because of this, or considering these ideas, Magnus Carlsen resigns in his 4th game. And by winning this game, Pragg levels the match and forces the tiebreak here, and they had to play the blitz game. The first blitz game was won by Pragg, and also the second game. So that means in the whole matchup, Pragg defeats Magnus Carlsen with the points like 4-2. So Magnus was having only 2 points, and Pragg scored 4 points in the matchup. So officially, Magnus Carlsen was defeated by Praggnanandhaa in the Crypto Cup again. And another most important thing is that earlier this year, he has already defeated Magnus for 2 times. So it's the 3rd time in the same year. So but the Crypto Cup was won by Magnus Carlsen because he was just 1 point ahead of Pragg, and the whole team behind the Pragg. So that means Pragg was the runner. So what do you think about this game? And let me know your ideas, thoughts, suggestions in the comment section below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And thank you so much for watching this video till the end. And if you're watching this channel for the first time, please consider subscribing to the channel and press the bell icon to get notified for the future videos. So as usual, this is Chess Wiser, your wise choice to improve your chess.